Sometimes in our programs, we want to be able to store multiple values as a single entity. For example, here we have some fruits. There are different things that we may want to store about the fruit, like the name, the color, and the weight. Now, let's say we want to store all of these as a single entity. Again, we could have another fruit, jackfruit here, color green, and weight of 7. All right. So if we want to store these quantities as a single entity, then we need a special user-defined type known as a struct. Again, this could be applied if you want to store some students' information. Again, for each student, we could have like an ID, first name, last name, a date of birth. All right, and that would be repeated for each student. So let's say I want to store each of these as a single entity. We would have to use a struct in C and C++. Now, by definition, a struct is a user-defined type that allows you to define a single entity to hold variables of different data types that are logically related to each other. In this session, we will look at how to define a struct in C++. We'll also look at how to create struct variables. We'll also look at how to assign values to the struct variables and also how to create functions. We will also look at how to get data from the user into our struct and how to create an array of structs. Now let's begin with an example. We are going to create a struct that is capable of storing information on fruits. So for example, if you want to store information like we have represented here, that is, we want to store multiple values under one entity. All right, so let's see. So we're going to start off our struct with the keyword struct, and it's lowercase, followed by the name of the struct. In our case, it's going to be fruit. All right. Now inside here, we're going to list the members of the struct. All right, so the members of the struct represents the attributes that we want to store the information for. That is, for example, for fruit, we have name, we have color, we have weight. All right, so we're going to define them here. Name, color, weight. All right, so these are the 3 attributes that we are working with for now. So we have successfully created our first struct. Therefore, it means that we can now represent different fruits in our program. All right, now in order for us to use these struct variables, these data members, we are going to have to create some struct variables. We define a struct variable by using the name of the struct as a data type. So let's see how that is done. So we're going to use the name of the struct just as how we would use any other primitive type that you would have used before. So we have fruit followed by the variable name. All right. So this lowercase fruit is now called a struct variable. Another way that we can define struct variable is by putting the variable in between the closing curly brace here and the semicolon. So if we put fruit 1 here, that defines another struct variable for us. Now, in our program, once we have defined the struct, we can create as many struct variables as we want. All right. So for now, I'm just going to be working with these 2. Now, in order for you to access the members of the struct, these are called the members of the struct. All right, so these are the members, all right, the data items that we have inside here. In order for us to access the members of the struct, we are going to use a struct variable that we have created. So we can either use the fruit here or the fruit 1 up here. And that is going to be followed by a dot. So for example, if I want to set the information for the first fruit that we have, let's say I want to set information to be apple for the name, red for the color, and 0.5 for the weight, what we would say is, so we are setting values. So it's a fruit dot, and if you notice, the compiler actually provide a list of the data members in the struct. So it's fruit.name equal to apple. If you want to set the color, we'd say fruit, that color is equal to red. And if you want to set the weight, we'd say fruit, that weight is equal to 0.5. All right. So that would be the information for the fruit instance, all right, this instance. Now, if you want to set for fruit 1, we can also do that. So we could say fruit 1 that name. So you can just specify the name, the color, and so forth. All right, let me just use what we have here. So we have jackfruit, ingredient 7. Fruit 1, that color, all to green. Fruit 1, that weight is equal to 7. All right, good. So we have so far defined the struct. We have assigned the values to the struct data members, as we can see here. All right, now let's see how we may go about printing the information. So to do that, I'm going to introduce a function in the struct. So far we have 3 data members in the struct. I'm going to create a function now in the struct to print out the information. So we are creating a function. All right, so we're defining our first function in the struct. And this function is just going to print out the information that we have stored for each struct instance. All right, so void print. This function is just going to be used to print out the name, the color, and the weight. So I'm going to just say cout name. I'm going to print out color. I'm going to print out the weight. All right. Good. So now that we have created a function to print the information from the struct, let's invoke that function using the fruit instance. So when we say fruit, just as how we say fruit that weight to access the weight here, fruit that color to access the color, fruit that name to access the name. If you want to print out the information for fruit, you'd say fruit dot print, and that will print out the information for fruit. Let's run it and see. All right, there's a missing semicolon there. And here we go. So we have apple, red, 0.5. Okay. Let's put some space between them. All right, to put space, I'm just going to use SetW to set the width. So I'm going to say SetW. I'm going to make it about 14 character space for the width for the name, and for the color, again SetW. For the color, I'm going to put let's use 14 for all of them. 14. All right. It's 14 for the name, 14 for the color, and I'm going to put 14 for the weight. All right, so they'll be evenly spaced. All right. Or in order for us to use the SetW as well, we need to include IO manip. So you should see that in the error message there. So we're going to see number sign. All right, so what happens here when we say SetW, all that is happening is that you can think of the display as different columns, like in a spreadsheet. So what we have done here is before we print the name, the column that the name will be printed in is going to be set to 14 character spaces. All right, so let's imagine that this is 14, and this is going to be the space for the color. Set that to 14 as well. And then we set the column space for the weight to be 14. So that's the idea. So that's what the SetW does. All right, so in order to use it, we use we include iOmanic. Now we can also specify if we want them to be left aligned or right aligned. Later on, we'll look at that. All right. All right, so what is this saying now? All right, so it says was not defined in scope. All right, set W, leave off the W. All right, so we should have a better. All right, so there it is. So they are now evenly spaced, as you can see. All right. So that is how we print out the information. Now, if we want to print out the information for fruit one, again, we just say fruit one.print. That prints the information for fruit one as well. All right, so let me just also end the line here. So the next time it's called, it just goes to a new line. Yeah, so there we have it. So we have two fruits now printed on the screen, and notice how they are lined up when they're printed. That's because we use a SetW. All right. So we have looked at how to define the struct, how to create the struct variable, how to assign values to the struct. We've also looked at how to create a function, which you would have done here inside of the struct. All right, so now we're going to look at how to get data from the user. So we'll look at how to read data from the user into the struct. So far what we have done is we have simply just assigned some values to the struct data members. All right. Now this is not always ideal. So we're going to look at what the approach that we would take if we are getting some data from the user. And now to do that, we're going to just create a different function instead of doing everything in main. So let me just create a function called get data. What this function is going to do, it's going to prompt the user to enter the values for name, color, and weight. All right, and we're going to be storing those into our struct. So we're going to all right. And so I'm going to create another struct variable to you that I'm going to use. So I want to create another struct variable, I could just say fruit 2, or I could just put a comma here and put fruit 2 there. All right. So I need the name. So I'm going to say cin fruit 2.name. And then I'm going to get the color. And say please enter the color, the fruit, and say fruit 2.color. All right. Same thing goes for the weight. Let's say fruit2.weight. All right, good. So this will now allow us to prompt the user for the information. So once this function is called, the user will now be able to enter the name, and the color, and the weight of the fruit. All right, so let us just comment out this part for now. So if we want to get the data, we just call get data down here. So once this is compiled, the user will be prompted to enter the information. So there it is. Say enter the name of the fruit. Say mango. The color yellow, and the weight 0.5. All right. So that's all it does. It's just allow you to enter the data. All right. Again, we could also print out the information for the particular fruit. So we could say something like fruit2 that print. And that will print out the information. So let's go again. Mango. And 0.5. That will print out the information for us. All right. Now, what if we want to get multiple fruits from the user? All right, so if we want to get multiple fruits from the user, let's see how we could go about that. Now, we could simply modify our get data method. Let's say I want to get 5 different fruits from the user. Of course, we could use a loop for this. So we could just say, or in count equal to 0, count less than or equal to 4, count increment. All right, so this will loop 5 times, so we'll be able to enter 5 different fruits. All right. But if we're going to use this approach, what's going to happen is that the struct variable will only be able to capture one of the fruits that we have entered. So even though we will be allowed to enter multiple fruits, at the end, only the last one that is entered will be represented. So each time a new fruit is entered, the previous name is going to be erased because it's the same memory space that is being used repeatedly, as you will see. When we invoke the print method, it will only print the last one. All right, so if we put in multiple fruits, mango, cigarette, the weight of 0.5, another fruit, color, all right, fruit, another fruit. All right, so the last one is the only one that is printed. All right, and rightly so, because this variable that we have defined here, it can only store one instance at a time of the fruit. Now, if we want a variable that is capable of storing multiple instances of fruit, what we're going to have to do is to define an array. And that takes us into how to define an array of struct. All right. So we're going to look at how we may define an array of struct to store the different instances of the fruit that we get in the loop. All right. So to do this, let's say fruit. I'm going to call it fruit. Say fruit array. And this is going to be used to define an array to store 5 different fruits. So I'm going to put in the size, right? So we are going to be storing 5 different fruits. All right. So if we want to just look at it from a more graphical point of view, so we can look at it this way. So when we define fruit 2, for example, fruit 2 has attributes name, color, weight. All right. Now, when we define the array, instead of just having one instance of the fruit, we have 5 different instances. So for each instance of the fruit, we have the name, the color, the weight, and that is repeated 5 times. Now, in order to access each instance, we use the index as indicated here. That's index 0 through to 4 in order to access these different fruit instances. All right. So let's look back here at how we may implement this in C. All right, so now that we have defined the array, now in order to access the elements and to have the data stored in the array, we start with the array name here. So we're going to say fruit array, followed by the index, which is count. So it's going to be fruit array count, that name. So you go fruit array count, that color. Fruit array count, that weight. So what this is going to do, as the value of count increases, the different index will be accessed. So when count is at 0, we're going to be dealing with the first set of name, color, and weight. When the count changes to 1, we go to the next set of name, color, and weight, and so forth, until count reaches 4, then we would have access all 5. Now, when this is done, it therefore means that the values that the user enter will be stored in the array. And so at the end, we can always print them out. All right. So let's compile this. All right, so there it is. So to see the real effect of it, we're gonna have to print them out. So let's say, so I'm gonna use what the loop. All right. Now what we're gonna do in this case, instead of calling a print with fruit 2, we are going to be invoking the print using the array. All right, so very simple. So let me just delete everything and leave 1. So we're just going to say something like fruit array count that print, and that will go through and it will print each instance. So when it comes to this instance, it will print out the name, the color, the weight. Then it comes to the next instance, it print out the name, the color, and the weight. And it will do that until count is 4. All right, so we'll see the output when we run this. All right. All right, let me just fix this so we have a better look for the prompt. Just put a colon here and a space. All right, so enter the name of a fruit, column, enter the name of a fruit, name of fruit, name of a fruit, and still another name. And there it is. So the reason we are able to print out the information here is because we would have used the array. All right, so that's it. So that's how we go about reading the data into an array, into a struct, an array of struct, and printing out the information. I could also add some headings here. So if you want that, so you could just add some headings if you want to the output, if that's something that you desire. All right, so thank you very much for watching.